Welcome to a very special program as we celebrate Asian
Lisa, you're muted.
Yeah, someone was helping and muted everyone, including me. That's okay. So welcome to telling the stories of Asian American heroines, Asian and Asian American heroines through portrait dolls with Sister Linda Kato. We're so thrilled to have you here, Linda, and sharing your wonderful dolls and the stories of these heroines from the Asian diaspora, which is a timely thing for us to do as we celebrate Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month throughout the month of May. Our organization, Silver Spring Town Center, as many of you know, is normally based in the Silver Spring Civic Building, but we are virtual through the summer, even though the rest of the world is starting to open almost overnight. But we are continuing our virtual programming through the summer, and we have several fascinating programs lined up for Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And on Wednesday, we have choreographer Nalima Devi presenting on Lakshmi, the goddess of abundance, through stories, poetry, and dance. And then we also have Christian O with the DC Asian American Film Festival, facilitating a discussion on the portrayal of Asian Americans in film and the media. So that will be on Friday, May 21st. Hope you can join us. All of our events are made possible with generous support from Montgomery County, United Therapeutics, the Arts and Humanities of Montgomery County, and many others. And we are also recording tonight's program. And now let's get started with the program. Our presenter, Linda Kato, RSCJ PhD, is a member of the Society of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, a progressive international order of Catholic nuns with a mission to manifest God's love through education, human development, and social justice. For many years, she lived this mission, teaching girls and young women to be leaders in her order's schools and social programs. After receiving her PhD from MIT, in political science, she designed and evaluated public and nonprofit services for low-income and disabled persons for corporations such as the MDRC and Goodwill Industries International. In her senior years, she was introduced to doll making by master doll artist Gwendolyn, also known as Wendy Daniels of Montgomery College. She equipped her with the skills and medium for a new educational role, bringing the stories of history's remarkable women from around the world out of the shadows to public awareness. Linda's dolls are portraits of women who overcame formidable barriers imposed by societies over the ages on their gender to become political, business, or religious leaders, revolutionaries, intellectuals, artists, or soldiers. She says her dolls allow her in these polarized times to engage people and discuss issues raised by these women in ways that cut across fault lines of ideology, race, ethnicity, gender, culture, socioeconomic class, and age. Her dolls were exhibited this spring by Towson University's Asian Arts and Cultural Center for the Asia North 2021 exhibition and the Sandy Spring Museum's 2020 exhibition, Art Dolls, Figurative Sculptures Tell a Story. She has presented her dolls as a panelist for the U.S. Library of Congress, Benjamin A. Botkin Folklife Center, African American Doll Making and Puppetry, Renegotiating Identity, Restoring Community, in February of 2020, and at the 2019 International Conference of the American Folklore Society. And her dolls are available for sale through Kato Historical Dolls on the Etsy at Kato Historical Dolls, and all the sales earnings fund leadership education programs for women and girls. And now I will turn it over to Sister Linda to begin the presentation, and we just ask that you put your questions and comments in the chat, and she'll address them as we go along. Take it away, Sister Linda.
Oh, thank you so much. And I want to thank Lisa and the Silver Spring Town Center. And thanks for all of you who are attending. I'm really grateful. And a shout out to my art doll instructor, Wendy Daniels. He's probably out there along with my fellow classmates at Montgomery College, and my jewelry instructor, Donna Weeks, and our classmates. And of course, my sisters and all the friends of the Society of the Sacred Heart who are attending. Next. According to the Pew Research Center analysis of the US Census just released earlier this month, Asians are projected to become the largest immigrant group in the United States by 2065, surpassing Hispanics. So I was given permission by my friend, fellow MITer, Neil Ruiz, to use these slides, which he produced with his study. Next. Asians in the U.S. come from an incredibly diverse array of ancestral nations in North, Central, South, East, and West Asia. It's important to note that contrary to stereotypes of us as a model minority, we actually have the greatest income disparities of any immigrant group in the United States. This is because we include on the high end those who were recruited by corporations with H-1 visas for their high skills, and the low end, impoverished refugees from countries like fleeing wars, persecution, and famines, for instance, from Myanmar, Pakistan, and Bhutan. So I just want to blow that stereotype away. Next. You'll also find us everywhere now in the United States. It used to be just on the West Coast and maybe in certain cities in the North and South. Now they're all over. And so in fact, right now, North and South Dakota are reporting the greatest percentage increase, North and South Dakota. And in Maryland, although in 2019, we were 6.2% of the total state population, in cities like Rockville and Gaithersburg, we comprise almost about a quarter of those cities' populations. Next. The greater visibility, therefore, however, has made Asians a target and scapegoat for society's fears and ills, most recently because of the COVID-19 in the United States. Next. It is therefore an important time to familiarize ourselves a little bit more about Asia and Asian immigrants in the United States. As a member of the Society of the Sacred Heart, of nuns, as I said as the bio said, I used my doll. I've added doll making as a way to add to my professional toolkit for reaching out to people and having conversations about a number of topics, particularly about women's leadership and the kinds of issues that a lot of these remarkable women that I portray tried to address in their time that are still relevant today. And Asian women in particular suffer from stereotypes of either being extraordinarily, inordinately passive and subordinate and so forth, but they also are sometimes they're sexualized as temptresses, nefarious temptresses. And that really was part of the background of the attacks in Georgia, of those massage parlors. And now for those interested in the construction of the doll, just a brief introduction. Again, I rely heavily on my tutelage from Wendy Daniels of Montgomery College. But what we do is she taught us to use these egg-shaped styrofoam balls and to recycle plastic water bottles basically to form the base of the head and the torso and so forth. And then we cover these with air dry clay. And that's how they're sculpted and they're gessoed and so forth. and then over and attached to a body that it's a aluminum wire frame with, and I use these wooden dowels to create articulated limbs, you know, that bend at the shoulders and wrists and elbows and at the knees and feet. I've increasingly been using polymer clay for the hands because I find it creates more delicate hands. So anyway, and the body is that, you know, we cloth stuffed with you know, just cotton. Okay, next. It's my dolls tonight reflect the huge size and diversity of Asia. This map includes the Middle East, Russia, and Turkey because there's such a large Asiatic population in these countries, especially along the borders. And this covers, this landmass covers dwarfs that of Europe and the United States combined, and covers almost 10 time zones. So it's a huge mass, okay, when we say Asia. Very, very, it's kind of too simple. Okay, next. So we're starting out with Empress Wu Zetian. She was the only woman who ever ruled China as empress in her own right, and not as a regent for a juvenile or an ailing emperor. She lived from 624 to 705, a Common Era. Both her supporters and detractors describe her as brilliant, decisive, and charismatic. Her climb to power began as a consort of Tang Dynasty Emperor Gao Zhang, and then as regent for their sons, the Emperors Zhongzhang and Ryozhang. And I apologize, I'm probably mutilating these pronunciations because I don't speak any other language than Japanese. Just stay there, okay? No. Yeah, and she took power ruling in her own right from also in 690 until her death. There are unfortunately no surviving portraits of her from life. My doll is inspired by paintings of Tang Dynasty women and is my interpretation of her character. Next. Wu Zetian is remarkable, in particular for ruling the vast Tang Empire, which is venerated by Chinese to this day as its greatest dynasty for its wealth, power, sheer size, and cosmopolitanism. Like its Western counterpart, the ancient Roman Empire, the Tang Empire encompassed a number of kingdoms north and west of China that it conquered militarily and that paid tribute and taxes to the Tang Emperor. Wu Zetian was a very capable military ruler and expanded the empire deep into Central Asia, as you can see, into Central Asia and into the Korean Peninsula and the sea routes of the spice trade with the East Indies. The next. The Tang Empire encompassed several cities whose populations exceeded 2 million. Chang'an was the imperial capital in north central China, and it was brilliant and very cosmopolitan. Compare this to ancient Rome, which at its height barely reached 1 million people. It was Chang'an was a center of government, commerce, and arts. You would see emissaries and traders from Arabia, India, the Roman and Byzantine empires, with Jews and Christians mingling with Buddhists and Taoists. There's a wonderful Chinese historical miniseries called The Longest Day in Chang'an that faithfully depicts the city and its cosmopolitan flavor. It's available for streaming with English subtitles on YouTube. Chang'an's grid layout and features were faithfully copied by the Japanese to build its first ancient capital in Nara. But you could see here in the photo to the left, that's a set that really tried to depict from that mini series that I was telling you about. Next. In this slide, the Tang Empire garnered much of its wealth and influence through its control of the Silk Road. And I think many of you probably heard that, of that. This was actually a network of trade routes connecting the East and the West, and was central to the economic, cultural, and political and religious interactions between those two parts of the ancient world, well into from 2nd century BCE onwards. It also included water routes connecting East Asia and Southeast Asia with South Asia, Persia, and the Arabian Peninsula, East Africa, and Southern Europe. So to the upper left, you see the a Tang pottery depiction of a camel and a driver, a non-Chinese camel and driver, reflecting the caravanseries that crisscross the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula and Central Asia. And note the Persian influence in the middle of that vase that of Tang pottery with its distinctive Sankai Tang glaze. Buddhism, including Buddhist art and literature, were also a major export of the Tang Empire. So, and Empress Wu invested heavily in the standing army and navy, which were critical to maintaining the safety of the Silk Road and China's revenue stream. And by the way, it's named the Silk Road because China had a monopoly on silk production at that and textile production at that time. Okay, next. Empress Wu Zetian's ascent to power is a reflection in many ways of the freedom that women enjoyed during the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty period offered opportunities for women that were unparalleled in major civilizations, east or west at the time, and also in subsequent centuries until the modern era. These opportunities, of course, were primarily for women of the aristocratic, merchant, and landowning classes. In all societies around the world, landless peasants really of both genders lagged far behind in political and socioeconomic rights. Otherwise, Tang Dynasty women, they could inherit, accumulate, and retain and pass on property to heirs of their choice. They could own and operate businesses independently. They could study history, politics, and arts in schools. Many became noted scholars, poets, painters, and musicians. Both wives and concubines could initiate divorce proceedings when their marriages were unsatisfactory. And quote, respectable women could enjoy a range of social activities, including in the company of men without their heads covered. They are described dining, drinking wine, and singing loudly with men in taverns. And they're competing with men in athletics, horseback riding, polo, which was brought from Persia, and the martial arts. You see a lot of those, women, those historical movies in Chinese with women, doing all kinds of martial arts. This is from that period. And women fought in and led military campaigns. Princess Pingyang Gongzhu was the daughter of the Emperor Gaozu, who was the founding emperor of the Tang Dynasty. She helped him gain the throne by organizing and leading an elite army to capture the previous dynasty's capital. And the Princess Taiping, daughter of Empress Gaozhong, also suppressed dangerous mutinies, leading an army. And women were particularly active politically in the Tang court. Wu Zetian's prime minister, she was the first female prime minister in China, and I think it's the only one, and her name was Zhang Wanye. Next. So eager to strengthen the administration of the empire, Wu Zetian was the first in the world to introduce the civil service examination to select candidates for the bureaucracy. This opened up the government to any person of any class in China, including sons of merchants and peasants. The notion of East Asian cultures valuing education as an avenue for advancement really kind of dates back to this, because you had whole peasant villages, investing their resources in one male candidate from their village to take the examination. And if he passed it, the benefits would accrue to the entire village. And of course, the aristocracy was furious. And because it took away their monopoly on government. And so they and the Confucian scholars vilified Wu Zetian's reputation in the following centuries. And they portrayed her as a vicious, bloodthirsty devil woman and accused her of using witchcraft and murdering her own sons to gain the throne. Okay, she was also a proponent of Buddhism across the empire, building monasteries and monuments through arts and scholarship, and sent missionaries to Japan, Korea, and Southeast Asia. Next. So my doll of Wu Zetian is shown wearing a traditional two-piece hanfu, which is a high-waisted garment, and it has a free-flowing Tang free-flowing Tang Dynasty style. It's hand sewn of Chinese silk brocade with a lavishly embroidered gold lace overgown. She wears matching brocade slippers with upturned toes. There was no foot binding of women, of upper class women, until later dynasties. It was not practiced then. Next. Her elaborately looped hairstyle and ornaments are very signature of the Tang Dynasty, which is famous for its opulent styles. Next. And like all of my dolls, she wears a complete set of underclothes, here made of 100% linen, and comes with a handmade wooden stand. Okay, next is we go next to Northeast Asia, and we meet Queen Shandok, who lived from 595 to 647 of the Common Era. This was during the period of history when Korean peninsula consisted of 3 independent kingdoms, Goguryeo, Bakche, and Shilla. Shandok was the princess of Shilla, the daughter of the reigning king and queen of Shilla. They had no male heir and were going to designate their son-in-law, the husband of their another daughter, to be the next king. But Shandok asked her father if she could be tested to see if she could inherit the throne, and she seems to have passed the test, and she inherited the throne in her own right. And again, she was the first and only Korean woman to be a ruler in her own right in Korea. And again, I don't have any, that portrait is really not taken during her lifetime. So I really don't have anything to go by, but except based on what I saw of other women of her time. And the crown is worn by this is the kind of crown that a king would have worn during the 3 Kingdoms period. Next. Shandok was renowned for her, and you see in the map, there's Shilla towards the southeast of the Korean peninsula. Shandok was renowned for her care of her people, limiting taxation of peasants and merchants, and providing state support for indigent, elderly, widows, and orphans. She's responsible for the construction of this famous Shomseong-dae astronomical observatory that you see over in the middle. And these observatories were relied on by farmers to plan their seasonal planting and harvesting of their crops. And then with this diplomacy and military might, she fended off invasions from the superpower Tang, China, and surrounding Korean kingdoms. She's also revered for introducing Buddhism from China to Shilla, building many temples and pagodas, the most famous being the one that is on the upper left corner. Shilla metalwork, including Buddhist statuary, was sought after throughout Asia. And you see many of these Buddhas, the Maitreya, like in the lower left. You see these in Japan because they were really heavily imported into Japan for its major temples, for example, in Nara and Kyoto. Arts and literature flourished under her patronage. Next. Shandok's doll is shown, is a fully articulated doll, and she's wearing the traditional royal crown and belt, signifying her kingship, her right to kingship during the 3 kingdoms period of Korea. And she wears the hanbok, which is the traditional dress of Korea, but of the style of the 3 kingdoms period, which is a little bit more flared. And she has a long brocade robe over a pleated silk satin skirt. And she wears a complete set of, again, of linen undergarments. And you can see there some of the jewelry that's all handmade. And again, thanks to my tutelage by Donna Weeks. Next. And more of her, you see the her jewelry, and you could see the articulated limbs of this doll. And she wears again the brocade slippers with the upturned toes that were fashionable during this time. And many of the gemstones are types of jade and jade-like semi-precious stones, because those were popular in Asia at that time. Next. And I made sure the accessories reflected her authority and faith. The crown, again, but her Buddhist rosary and the Korean stone incense burner, again, her faith. Next. Now we're going to swing up down southwards to Southeast Asia, to what is now modern day Indonesia, to see the Kumala Hagyarti. We don't know her date of birth, that she died probably in 1615 Common Era, is the world's first woman to serve as a naval admiral. She was born and raised in Aceh, which is now the westernmost state of modern Indonesia, which was one of the world's most powerful empires of the 16th and 17th centuries. She was capable and ambitious, and Kumalai Hagyarti took advantage of educational opportunities that were open to girls and women in Aceh at the time, attending an Islamic boarding school and then graduating as an officer from the elite Aceh Royal Military Academy. Next. The Aceh Sultanate, again, was one of the most powerful empires in the 16th and 17th century in the world. And the Aceh capital, Kutaraha, now Banda Aceh, is depicted by a painting from that period on the right. And it was, and then you see on the left, the Raya Balturaham Mosque, which was faithfully reconstructed after the Dutch totally destroyed it during their brutal scorched earth campaign from 1873 to 1914 to bring Aceh under its control. But that gives you a sense of the kind of architecture that the Sultan promoted. Next. The Aceh Sultanate derived its power primarily from the control of the Malacca Strait, which you see in the upper map. It was strategically critical to access the spices and gold mines of the East Indies, which is what they used to call Indonesia and Malaysia, for India, China, and Europe. The Portuguese had just subjugated the Sultan of Malacca and took control of the Malacca Strait, and then the Aceh Sultan Aladdin Mansur Shah, who Kumala Hagyarti served, had invested heavily in strengthening his navy and successfully deployed them to defeat the Portuguese for control of the Malacca Strait and also much of the Malay Peninsula. Kumalai Hagyarti was critical in these battles with the Portuguese and subsequent battles to retain control of it for Aceh. Next, the Dutch, who supplanted the Spanish and Portuguese as the Europe's maritime power in the 17th century, were eager to take control of the Malacca Strait, back for Europe. And so the Sultan appointed Kumala Hagyarti as the first admiral of his powerful navy, based on her reputation as a fierce and brilliant commander in his earlier battles with the Portuguese. She took the unprecedented step also of recruiting widows of the fallen seamen from those battles for her navy, and it was called had its own title, Inyong Bali Army. And you see women in the right, upper right, they're current contemporary reenactors in Aceh who celebrate her life, every year with them. And the Dutch, in 1599, the Dutch explorer and naval commander Cornelius de Houtman, who, by the way, is revered in Holland the Netherlands for his naval career, but is not in Indonesia, obviously, was arrived in Aceh, and he responded to the Sultan's peaceful welcome by insulting him and demanding that Aceh, surrender their control of the Malacca Strait and obedience to the Dutch Republic and so forth, and attacked the capital. So Kumala Hagyarti responded swiftly, and after several violent naval battles, killed Houtman later that year. The Dutch continued to send naval vessels in what were effectively pirating missions, because they just boarded, trading vessels and tried to steal their rich cargo. So Kumalai Haryarti became legendary as the angel, the guardian of Aceh, repeatedly defeating the Dutch and ensuring the safety of the seas for trade. The humiliated Dutch were forced to send emissaries to negotiate a treaty with the Sultan and offer monetary compensation. The Dutch defeat persuaded Queen Elizabeth of England to also send emissaries instead of her English pirates like Drake to peacefully negotiate a treaty for access to the Malacca Strait from the Sultan. So Kumalai Haryarti died later in a naval battle, fighting to the end against the colonial forces. But it's through her efforts that Aceh was able to remain safe for decades from Western colonial encroachment. She paved the way for the Sultanate to enter a golden age of under the revered Sultan Iskandar Muda, who made Aceh not only a center of Islamic culture and learning for East Asia, but also expanded its borders all the way across Sumatra and northwards into modern Malaysia. Okay, next. For Kumalai Haryarti's doll, I didn't have a likeness of her during her lifetime, but her features I took from some extraordinary Aceh women who tend to be very, very, strong, kind of women. And she wears the traditional formal costume of Aceh, which is a high-necked silk brocade jacket and a figured silk wrapped sarong, which both men and women wear. With hand-sewn sequins, I made a breastplate to protect her torso and as gauntlets for her wrists. And she's armed with a katana-type sword and matching ceremonial silk hood. Next. More close-ups of her doll again. And next. And again, you see she's an fully articulated doll, and she comes with a handmade wooden stand. Next. Next, we're going to go clear across westwards to Asia to the Indian subcontinent. So of the Mughal Empire during the late 16th century. Empress Nur Jahan was the beloved wife of Mughal Emperor Jahangir. Well-educated, politically astute, and charismatic, she became the real power behind the throne for her chronically ailing husband. I highly recommend Ruby Lal's 2018 biography, Empress, The Astonishing Reign of Nur Jahan. She's now become a feminist icon of modern India. Next. The vast Mughal Empire was founded in 1526 by an Uzbek tribal chief, Babur the Conqueror. It was an Islamic dynasty in which is now predominantly his Hindu country. Under Nur Jahan's capable rule, she expanded the empire southwards into almost the entire Indian subcontinent and westwards into Central Asia, including Afghanistan. Next. It's only in the 21st century that historians have recognized and expanded upon the extent of Nur Jahan's independent political authority. The power of behind the throne for Emperor Jahangir really doesn't adequately describe the independent authority that she exercised and how critical her governance was for sustaining the Mughal Empire at the peak of its power. She signed and issued imperial orders, having been given charge of the imperial seal of the emperor, and this implied that her review and approval of any documents, regulations, etc., were necessary for them to be recognized as law. No other woman in the Mughal dynasty had ever done that and would do that in the future. Coinage was issued in her name. Nur Jahan headed royal council meetings and met diplomatic delegations, and she even led troops into battle on her military elephant to fight foreign invasions and domestic insurrections. Next. The Mughal Empire is renowned for its literature, delicate paintings, and awe-inspiring architecture. Nur Jahan was not only a patroness of the arts, but she was an architect and poet in her own right. She played a critical role in South Asia's transition in architecture from the use of red brick to white stone in monumental buildings, and of its decorative use of delicate carving embedded with semi-precious stones. The tomb of her father, which she designed, was the inspiration for the Taj Mahal that was later commissioned by the emperor, her stepson. Next. Nur Jahan also designed the tomb of Jahangir for her husband, which you can see again. You can see the elements of the Taj Mahal and this gorgeous tomb itself where he's buried. Next. And this is some close-ups of her doll. She wears a silk, she wears a replica of the opulent Mughal court dress. She wears not one, but two, what they call Peshwas robes with a high-waisted fitted bodice. One is of brightly patterned silk brocade, hand-trimmed with glass pearls. The other is peach sequined lace with bead embroidery. Next. Beneath, she wears, this is more photo close-ups of her turban, and which again, symbol of her authority, and her jewelry, and the gown and the material itself. Next. Beneath, she wears the silk taffeta midriff barring top called a choli and matching flared pajama pants. Fitted at the ankles. Her elaborately bejeweled turban is inspired by the portrait of her in the introductory slide, and she wears brocade slippers with upturned toes, and they're handcrafted necklaces, rings, and earrings. Next. Finally, we fly all the way over to the west coast of the USA to meet Chinese-American Tin Fu Wu, and we actually have photos of her. Next. In prehistoric times, the most earliest human inhabitants of North and South America were Asiatics who traveled here from Northeast Asia over the frozen Bering Strait during the Ice Age. However, in modern times, Asians only became a significant presence in the US with the 1849 gold rush to California. Mostly from China, but increasingly from Japan, India, and the Philippines, they joined the hundreds of thousands of men, and mostly men, again, seeking their fortunes from around the globe. San Francisco soon had the highest concentration, just San Francisco itself had the highest concentration of Chinese in the US. They came to mine, build the transcontinental railroad, dig ditches for aqueducts and canals, and ended up also setting up stores and so forth. Nativist, white supremacist movements surged during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. These groups decried the flood of Jews, Slavs, and Catholics coming from Europe, but at least they were white. They really were upset when these, yellow people came from Asia, and they were just panicked and incensed. And so the Chinese residents and establishments in California, in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and in the Central Valley were constantly targeted by mobs who destroyed Asian districts and lynched residents. I mean, lynchings were constant. It's interesting because in San Francisco, so many the Irish and Italian immigrants were particularly violent. It's during the 1870s because that was when the United States was going through a major depression, and so they saw these Asians as competing for the same jobs and resented them mightily. So in 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act banned immigration from China completely. This was soon extended to immigration from any Asian country. And also, it's important to know that Asians could not seek citizenship through naturalization until 1952. Okay, so that's kind of near my birth date, so it seems recent to me. All right, and next. Now, I mentioned that many of the people who came first from Asia were men. And so there was a real dearth of women, particularly in San Francisco, but across anywhere where Asians were in California. And the Page Act of 1875 had banned immigration of females formerly from China to encourage Asian men in the US to return to China. So the underground trafficking of women and girls flourished from China, and then increasingly from Japan, Korea, and the Philippines. They were either kidnapped from the streets of China or sold by impoverished parents from, this was common in patriarchal cultures where fathers had absolute authority over the family and females were less valuable than sons. So, and these, what's really horrible is that they were so young. Many of these trafficked women were not really women. The average age was from 12 to 15 years. And their lifespan in servitude was less than 4 years because of the brutal conditions in which they're forced to work. If they were in prostitution, between sexually transmitted diseases, brutality, and malnutrition, and they also forcibly addicted them to opium. They just didn't last, and they were often thrown into the alleys of Chinatown to when they were dying and they were of no use. It was horrendous. So you see a lot of these young girls, and many of them also worked in factories and as household domestics. So they were, and unfortunately, the police and the municipal authorities were hand in glove with these traffickers. And so they just kind of overlooked this. And you could see what's horrible is if you read Julia Flynn Silver's book, on this new book, about this kind of slave trafficking, it's really powerful because she talks about these women being, who had been trafficked and brought over, landing out in the harbor, San Francisco, Bay, and being stripped naked and auctioned off in public. I mean, this is when we've already had the 13th Amendment, which banned slavery in the United States, but it was not enforced, and it was not seen as applying to Asian trafficked women and girls. Next. So our heroine, Tian Fu Wu, was forcibly brought to the U.S. from Zhejiang, China in 1892 as as a 6-year-old daughter, after being sold to traffickers by her father to pay his gambling debts. The terrified girl, smuggled into San Francisco, was forced to work as a mutsai, or domestic slave, for a brothel and then a gambling den, where she was harshly used and brutally abused by her owners. If she had survived her adolescence, they would have most likely forced her to work and engage in sex work. Presbyterian and Methodist churches were active in proselytizing to the heathen Chinese immigrants. However, it was their women members who were horrified by the plight of trafficked Chinese women and girls in San Francisco and in the Bay Area. They did something about it. In defiance of their male pastors and congregations, who were scandalized by the idea of women associating with Asians and seeing the seamier side of the city. They founded the Mission House on 920 Sacramento Street, now the Donaldina Cameron House, which was first of several shelters that were set up for Asian trafficked women and children. These women and girls had either escaped on their own, which is extraordinary, and fled to the shelter of this house, or were rescued by the home staff and police supporters. In addition to the shelter, they got counseling, got an education, and learned trades such as sewing. Now, in 1894, Tian Fu Wu was rescued and brought to the Mission House. She was malnourished, frail, tinier than they should be, and she was covered with bruises, welts, and burns inflicted by her sadistic owners. Tian learned to read and write for the first time, and with so much intelligence and determination, she was sponsored by a wealthy Presbyterian Mission House donor who lived in Philadelphia. And he sponsored and had her to attend and graduate from the prestigious Stevens School in Philadelphia, which, by the way, the Princess Grace attended, and then from the Toronto Bible College. And now, well educated and fluent in both English and Chinese languages and cultures, she chose to return to Cameron House to continue their work. She had a really extraordinary career. She particularly was helpful in the law courts to ensure that these women and girls who had been rescued were not returned to their slave owners and deported. In those times, these slave traffickers not only had the best of legal defense, but lawyers, legal assistants, but they would say that these women and girls even had signed a contract and therefore had to, comply with this contract, and the courts had to defend this contract. And the girls and stuff, these contracts, they couldn't even read, they couldn't read them, and they couldn't write their signature. They just had their thumbprint on it, which was forcibly done. But still, many of them were returned to their owners. So the Cameron House was really instrumental in fighting these battles, a lot with the help of white male legal support. And in one of these critical cases, they finally took it to the U.S. federal court, and to fight a major trafficker who was, and he, I'm sorry, I don't have the name here, but they were able to defeat him in court, finally getting the testimony of two trafficked women whom Tianfu Wu was critical as a translator, as a support counselor, et cetera, to help them get through this terrifying testimonial trial and testifying. Next. My Tianfu Wu's doll is shown here with a domestic slave child, just like she once was. I have a backdrop of Chinatown at that time, and what it covers is a Chinese worker carrying, two buckets, on a pole. Next. And her doll is shown here, is a fully articulated doll, again, with all the underclothes and so forth. And she wears a wool checked suit lined with Chinese silk with a high neck cotton blouse, which is typical of the 1910s decade. She has a full set of cotton batiste underclothes, hat, and leather boots that I've all made. Next. Tian is shown comforting and removing the arm and leg shackles that bind a child domestic slave whom she has rescued. The little girl wears a Chinese jacket and slacks of linen that were really typical of a boy, but that's what many of these poor enslaved children, domestics, were forced to wear. And I want to mention also that Tianfu Wu also went around to the state legislature and also to the U.S. Congress to testify for immigration reform, for the end of slave trafficking, and so forth. So she was phenomenal. She was, of all the women, Donaldina Cameron, who was legendary as the director of Mission House, was she wasn't fluent in Chinese, and so she couldn't do a lot of the work with the residents who were limited to Chinese, and doing the translating for legal reasons. And so she depended on other former residents who were adults to be part of the staff, and they were, and there's a whole slew of them that Julia Flynn Seiler talks about in her book. But Tianfu Wu was unique because of her education and just her devotion to this work, and being able to present herself in so-called Western circles in across the U.S. and with political and religious and a lot of major donors, like Phoebe Hearst, was one of them. And so she also succeeded Donaldina Cameron as the head of Mission House. So extraordinary life. Next. And I just wanted to end by conclude. First of all, before another thing about Tian Fu, that kind of trafficking in Asian women and girls continues to this day, unfortunately. And any kind, again, of children and women. Many of them now come from either rural China or impoverished communities of Southeast Asia, Pakistan, South Asia. And so, be aware of that. This is not, and they still use the same tricks of kidnapping women or, promising them great jobs. They're often sold by their parents, again, in these patriarchal cultures. So it's something that is still a battle today that we, and also these marriage services where, people out here think that women are these very docile creatures, bring them over to the United States and subject them to all kinds of abuse with the threat of deportation. So it is still real today. And then I want and then I conclude by referring you to more of my portrait dolls of history's remarkable women and their stories at my Etsy shop, Kato Historical Dolls. And I have dolls of all eras and nations, not just of Asia. I think it's so important to tell their stories because I don't know about you, but I grew up in school here where they didn't really talk about women's accomplishments, and a lot of the histories about them, especially those of non-Western countries, were not available and were not written until feminist research really took off in the 60s and 70s. And so much of the information I quote comes from very recent biographies written by feminist historians. And and also many of my dolls precede they have to be before 1930s, except for Amanda Gorman here because I loved her so much, at the inauguration, because of trademarking issues. That many of the estates of women more recently. If you say someone like, oh, why don't you make Ruth Bader Ginsburg or something? It's because I can't. She's trademarked, by her heirs. So things like that. But otherwise, feel free to suggest on my website things, people that you'd like to see. And all of my sales, the returns go to programs for women leadership programs for women and girls. All right, and so it's not. I'm a nun. I don't get any of that. It goes. It's specifically to raise money for programs. Next. And I want to give a shout out in particular to Professor Gwendolyn Daniels of Montgomery College. She's a master doll artist, and check out her doll making and doll accessories classes over at the the Silver Spring and Tacoma Park campuses. She's just excellent and such a wonderful sport. And the fellow doll artists who are part of her classes, we've become a real group. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to her. I hope she's out there tonight. And next, and I'll ask Lisa to make these available to you all after the program. But these are additional resources, books that I highly recommend, including these various TV docudrama series. These, in other countries other than the US, in particular in Asia, they're very proud of their history, and they do a bang-up job of their depicting historical times and historical characters. And women historical figures have become a really big deal in Asia. It's interesting. They really get it, now. And so these were two of them that and some of them, they play a little fast and loose with some of the drama, like Empress of China and so forth. But if you're interested particularly in costumes and sets and so forth, they're wonderful. And Queen Shondak of Sheila, again, what I told you about the longest day in Shangan, that's excellent. All right. And also I just wanted to say that I'm happy to do presentations, of my dolls of any period, any month, because I'm not just limited to Asia, for you, because for me, it's all about education. Next. And again, I'm sorry. And again, here's my contact information, which I'll share, make sure Lisa shares with you all. So next, any questions or comments or answers, I'd be happy. We have plenty of time, so I'd be happy to take.
Hi, this is Bernie. Do you want the questions? I don't know how to do a written question.
Sure, just do it verbally.
Okay, I don't know how to do that. I'm not that smart yet.
No, I'm fine.
I had just a couple questions. Could you talk a little bit more about how you made the crown for Shinduck?
Oh, I think I've made it about 20 times,
What is the base of it? Did you start with a cardboard base and then?
No, actually what I did was I got some a sheet of copper from the art supply place at Montgomery College, the Rockville campus. They sell a lot of that, and it was the easiest. It was actually the kind that I could cut. I'm not a metalsmither, so I can't do fusing and all. And I live in an apartment, so I burned the place down. So what I did, I needed something metal that I could literally cut with a scissor, and I got a piece of copper sheet, and then I painted it in spray painted it in gold, and then I crafted it out of that. That's how I did it.
Okay, so it actually is some sort of metal.
Right. Right.
Wow.
I am not a metalsmither. If I wish I could be, even if I could, I couldn't do it in my where I live because it's illegal, so but that would be my ideal, to be able to do it with metalsmithing, but I can't.
Okay, and then one other question, because I don't want to take up everybody else's
No,
time.
it's all right. I think it's a long.
But your costumes are so very elaborate, and so how long does it take you? Because I know for me, but how long does it take you to research your concept and gather all of your materials together, to get to finally decide on the fabrics that you want to use, and how long does it really take you to pull your whole concept together?
Well, to be honest with you, the clothing part is not hard for me because I love fashion history. So I started before I was a doll artist. I was studying fashion history on my own. I mean, here's this nun, but I love fashion history. So I have a gazillion patterns and that I adapt. Read about this, all this time. And so to me, when I think about a person in a period, I already have her. It's almost like I already have her ensemble in mind,
Wow.
and I have, me, I have too much fabric, and so I've got too much trim, whatever. I even make my own trim, so that hasn't been hard for me. I think it's more the making of the doll, the sculpting of it, to try to be as accurate as possible. And that's what I've really relied on my fellow doll artists, you guys, to help me out with that. And then just learning. I mean, I'm constantly trying to learn new tricks. Like I said, polymer clay is more recent use that I've done to make delicate hands and stuff like that. To me, takes the longest, I think. But of course, on my European dolls, I mean, there's a lot. We didn't talk about them here, but there are a lot of the undergarments are much more complicated, So I'm making the corsets, making the panniers for the 18th century, the ruffs, the Renaissance, all that stuff. And I do a lot of bead embroidery. That does take a long time, but the concept is not hard for me to find. I'm inspired by portraits and all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
And so, yeah. I think, Fred, did you have a question?
Thank you.
Yes, Fred has a question, and there are also some questions in the chat.
If you don't mind reading some of those
I would
off.
like really,
I will after.
I would like to thank, yes.
Oh.
Thank you very much for very interesting presentation, really statistics and history and pictures, everything. And I think you have it has been recorded, and I would like to have possibility of access to have been presented. And
Mhm.
is it possible?
Yes, we were talking about,
Okay,
I
great.
asked Lisa if they could put it
And
on.
also,
Uh-huh.
my question, probably from Ms. Lisa, is how do they found my name? How did my name came in mailing list? And I'm very glad that I have been invited and registered. But if you have in future similar programs, I would like to receive the information and register. It was very,
Okay.
very good, and I appreciate that. Because in our family, which has become now international, we have from China, from Japan, from India, and we have become international family now, you know. And it's very interesting. I have read many books about China, which has been my interest about the history, and especially in this 200 centuries recent, and what has gone through these changes and things. Thank you very much again.
Well, thank you for coming. And Lisa will, I think anyone who's been on this register probably ends up on your list, right, Lisa? Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
We have
Whatever,
people.
however
And
it
if-
has come, it's okay. And I'm glad that I
Yeah.
have received the information and I could attend.
Thank you
Great.
so much, and thank you
Well,
for
we're
attending. But I think you
glad to
raised,
have
I think you raised a good point, though, that, you know, in those statistics that I brought up, it was from the U.S. Census that of the people who only clicked off Asian only. You know, they didn't include the people who were biracial or multiracial that also clicked off on Asian. And that's something that, you know, again, my family now is multiracial too. You know, my niece,
Yeah.
German and Asian. My niece,
Oh, yeah.
nephews are Chinese and
Yeah.
and again, it's Indian, you know, and so forth. And so I think that's the story of
Yeah.
America. And so the more we understand and
Yeah.
I think see the diversity even in our own families of what is constitutes
Yes.
Asian is so critical. I
Yes.
wish that they would, again, all of us, I think all of our cultures need to be taught more, you know, educated more
Yes.
about it. We don't even get Black history, you know, in schools. And I think in slavery, you know, and so I think I'm hoping that we see more of this as we go forward, you know.
Great.
Thanks again.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
Wonderful. Oh, I didn't mean to just spotlight myself. Yes, you are added to our mailing list. And if you want to be on a rare list, like once a month and just get the newsletter, let me know. And we have the occasional monthly list. And just a few questions in the chat. There was a comment from Emmy, who says, for those who may not know Linda personally, she is also a dedicated mom to rescued guinea pigs, which is terrific. How did you get into that, Sister Linda?
Well,
how did you?
I mentioned that, you know, it's true. And it's, again, one of my, another toolkit where if you are in, you know, in these polarized times ideologically, there's one thing that everyone tends to agree on is across at least good people, you know, there's a lot of support for animal rescue and for, you know, and the safety and security of pets, you know. And I remember watching a GOP congressman in bringing up a federal law for increasing the penalties for animal cruelty, you know. And he said, you know, this is something where our two aisles can agree on, you know. And so I felt like, you know, when I'm helping with rescue, or whether it's going out and meeting hoarders, or, you know, also being with fellow volunteers, we just run the gamut of ideology and race. And so I think that that's another place that I tend to put myself, where I can meet and speak to different types of people and not be in my own little ideological bubble. You know, so that's why.
Well, that's terrific. We love animal lovers and those who are stewards of the earth and all of the wonderful creatures of the earth. Just reading in the chat, there were a couple questions. I know Barry wanted to know the dimensions of your dolls. Elizabeth asked also if you were, he wanted to know Gilly and Barry both asked about the size of the dolls. And Elizabeth asked if you ever show these in embassies.
I would be, first of all, in terms of size, most of the dolls now are 18 inches or less. I'm trying to keep it a little smaller since they ship more easily that way. But I have ones as big as 21 to 24 inches. Those more from the past. But I try to do about 18 inches at this point. No bigger than that. Even 16 inches. And in terms of showing, I'm always open to showing whoever invites me, so if anybody from an embassy would like to see and also I'm happy to special order too, but I would be happy to do, if you look at my site, they come from a number of different countries from Europe, and I'm constantly adding, as well as from Africa and from Asia and so forth. So please, I'm happy to respond.
Great. And how many dolls do you have you made?
At this point, it's I probably about 25 of them at this point. I need to get rid of some of them, in terms of sales and so forth, because I honestly, my little place it can't hold them anymore. I have nowhere to sit.
Right. So what was the number?
Them, please. And again, just to mention, these are art dolls for display, as I say, not toys for play.
Right.
So they'll break if a kid, you give it to a child. It's not for that purpose.
Right. Great. I saw some other hands up. If you'd like to ask Linda a question, maybe raise your hand, or
because I can't get a gallery view. I'm sorry for some reason.
The little the 9 little squares. You click on that. You see that?
I'm not. It's not letting me do it. I'm sorry. If you don't mind, just choosing people, I'd be so grateful. Okay.
No, yeah. I'm just looking to see if anybody has raised their hand. Or Lauren, I think you had a comment, and Lauren's also a doll maker. So Lauren's on our board of directors and hosts our art salon.
Yeah, no, I was just saying how wonderful it was to see your dolls, and I love the exquisite details, and attention to historical accuracy is lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we were in the class together, so it was wonderful to hop on over to your table and watch what you were doing. It was like, somebody else who loves working with beads and justifies having such a big collection of them. Yes.
Thank you.
Great. And I see Donna had her hand up for a question. Donna.
Hi, Donna.
Unmute and.
Donna, you need to unmute.
Where did she go? Or Monica, sorry. Yeah, there was a Donna earlier, but I think she left. And Monica, where is Monica?
Hi. Oh, I can't hear her.
Yeah, if you unmute Monica. I have to scroll through. You have such a big turnout of people here.
Monica, we can't hear you.
Monica, here she's unmuted now. We can hear you now if you go ahead.
Monica, you're still muted.
Oh, what a pity. It may be something on her computer rather than in her Zoom, because here, let's ask to unmute again. She was unmuted in Zoom. Oh, there try that.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
now
hi.
we can. We can hear you. We can hear you now. Oh.
Okay, now I can hear you. Okay, I had the
see,
wrong button. Well, this question is really for you, Lisa, I think, and that is, how do we get that wonderful list of the movies and the books? I was scribbling it down as long as it was available. Do you know what I'm talking about, Linda?
Take a picture of it.
Linda
that's a good idea. Take a picture.
If I don't know if Linda has the links handy to put into the chat. If not, I can post them on Facebook. Or if you join Silver Spring Town Center's Facebook page,
Okay.
I can post the links, and we will also post the video there in a few days. So join silverspringtownCenter.com/groups/Silver Spring Town Center, and watch for the posting. I'll get the links up as soon as I can on there. And if you're not on Facebook, you can email me and ask.
Okay. Okay, good. I will do that.
Are you able to just send the video to the participants?
As long as Sister Linda has approved, which I think she has.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
If you want to email me, I can forward you the link. I have downloaded it from, I recorded it on Zoom because it's more reliable.
Right.
And then
just
I can
'cause
share a link.
You sent us all reminders, so you have the email list, right?
Yeah, but I guess.
You'd prefer
I mean,
people to email you, is that it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure
Okay.
everyone will need to have me
Okay.
email their
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
right, thank you. And who else had a question for Sister Linda or comment? Where were we here? Yeah,
Can
so
I make
who's
one
talking?
more,
Yes.
Fred? The issue of racism, I wasn't aware about the Asian problem here. I was not until the media brought it up, because I have so many good friends from China and educated in university people and so on. And I hadn't heard about it, but when it came, I was surprised. Is there any way in kind of these topics to increase the awareness of people? Because that issue comes from ignorance of people about the world that we are living in. And especially United States, which is multicultural, multi-racist, and that's something that could be discussed and to develop and increase the awareness of people about why should we think this time of education and knowledge and everything to go to these kind of topics. I don't know how this could be brought as a topic to be discussed and improve the thinkings or enhance understanding of people.
Well, there actually are a number of, I'm actually working on another committee for Baltimore Sister Cities, which is putting on a panel discussion on April 27th to talk exactly about this, what you're talking about. The Baltimore City Mayor, the Governor's Office on Asian and Immigration and Investment, and a number of state senators and the Towson University's Asian Arts and Culture Center are approaching this topic from multiple perspectives and addressing exactly the kind of questions. I'd be happy to post information about that as well. And it's, I think this issue really came, what the Pew Research that I posted some slides from that just came out in April, it shows that this anti-Asian racism has been long-standing, and it's been continuing over the years. It's nothing new, but I think with COVID, we became a convenient scapegoat, given the animus towards China in general right now because of its growing power. And also there's right now, because I think I showed in that slide, we are going to be the #1 immigration group by 2065. And we are at there's another slide that Pew has where it shows that the historic composition of immigrants as a percentage of the US population now is as high as it was at the turn of the century, when this nativist racism in the late 19th century was at its greatest too. That's when there was the Ku Klux Klan, there were all these anti-nativist groups, there was the Anti-Asian Immigration Act and all that. We're at the same point in the US right now because the percentage of immigrants as a percentage of US population is at the same level, and it's even getting higher. So a lot of the nativist groups, you know, who don't want this country to become multicultural and multiracial, it's the same phenomena. And that's what the Pew research has been really focusing on. I'll be happy to share that report because it'll answer a lot of your questions. And also because we have social media now covering it, a lot of the racist attacks that went on before didn't get much coverage among Asians, but a lot of Asian activists put it on social media so that the mainstream news channels were finally giving it attention. So that's all very different right now. Mm-hmm.
Another place is Rockville City Sister. Rockville Sister Cities is a committee. They can do also something because they have a sister city of Rockville in Germany, mm-hmm. and in China and Taiwan. And this sister city committee can do also something to enhance the awareness of people about
they're actually supporting the effort, that the presentation that Baltimore Sister Cities is. I live in Gaithersburg, but still I participate in this one. And so they're supposed to be promoting it. So I'll share that information with you though, okay? Because if you're part of the Rockville one, thank you.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's Rachel from Baltimore Sister Cities, and I put the URL to our event on May 27th that Linda Kato is helping with. It's in the chat.
Rachel's the one spearheading it, so.
Oh, I'm not spearheading it. I think you are spearheading it, but I'm just helping. Thank you.
Thank you for being on tonight. And thank you, Fred. I hope we meet sometime, you know. Let's see.
I just want to make a comment to follow up on.
Jerry.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment to follow up that that Montgomery County, not just Rockville, sister cities include, I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's Hyderabad, India, and Daejeon, South Korea.
That's great.
Xi'an, China. I forgot about that. So we are. Montgomery County has multiple South Asian sister cities, as well as other parts of the world.
I should have gotten in touch with you guys, you know, because
you did a great
I'm working at the Baltimore right now in the Kawasaki sister city there. So
well, maybe you'll do one for Montgomery County.
We'll do. I mean,
you are doing it through this, but
yeah, because we're funded by the county. Terry's on our board of directors, and she just knows about so many things going on in the county. So that's great to know. And to I knew, but to remind everyone to share. Wendy had a comment that Linda, this is a beautiful body of work. The attention to detail is fantastic. Thank you for the wonderful support of MC programs. And there are so many rave reviews for you. Thank you, Linda. Your dolls are marvelous, and I enjoyed the presentation greatly. Catherine says, wonderful presentation, hermana linda.
Oh, dear. And I want to give a shout out to Wendy over there. That's Wendy Daniels, my instructor, my God, you know. And I want to thank her so much. It's a tribute coming from you.
Yeah, well, there's a wonderful circle of talented folks in Wendy's doll community. So whom we've featured. Bernadina's been with us, and Camilla's spoken with us many times, and Lauren is on our board and is active in SSTCI programs as well.
I think we all had to take our doll making seriously in terms of its educational power and communicative power about issues. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very effective way because it gets people's attention and, you know, incorporates the arts with social justice and history and issues of the day. So it's great. Lauren says, I love the guinea pig costumes too. So you make costumes for your guinea pigs?
Oh, I do.
Oh God, do you
another
have
fundraising for them?
Oh my gosh, you should have Do you, I would love to see the cost. Maybe we
Do you have
can
any, does she have any
post
now?
them. I don't know. I'm sharing, I'm the one who was sharing the screen. I don't know if I think it might be hard for her to go dig them out, or unless you have them handy, we could.
No, I don't. I don't. And my guinea pigs would be furious if I made them wear it right now. So they're already biting my toes right now.
Can you lift one up and show us the guinea
There's one
pig?
on the screen.
I have one lifted. Hi, Linda
right now?
and Lisa. Linda, is this
Oh.
yours?
And it's St. Pat's hat.
The St. Patrick's.
Oh.
Oh, that's not. That's
Oh,
just a basic one. I think.
I know.
Yeah,
I have to
Felicia.
find a better one.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
they're
heard
so
do the one with the. Well, anyway, any other questions about the presentation? I'm sorry.
So cute. Yes, this is wonderful to see the guinea pigs. Thank you. Okay, who else has a question or comment for Linda? Did you have one, Emmy?
No.
Okay, great.
Is this something that you
Sure.
could get in touch with Montgomery County Public Schools to have? I mean, it's obviously not really elementary school, but I guess it could be 5th grade. But for something that, you know, the recording of what the presentation you just did, or maybe even modified a little bit more, so it's more accessible for kids. But I mean, basically what you did, what you shared, and some of the social justice, I think would be great for high school, actually middle school. It's just, I think it's just a little bit, what the presentation you gave tonight was for adults, but I would think it would be wonderful to do it for the kids.
And you know, and frankly, I happy to present in person to some of these schools, and also to elementary. You can always change, you know, scale it, you know, some of the things down, but I think really focusing on the cultures in which they lived and so forth, and really make it kind of exciting. I actually had a little clip that I thought we wouldn't have enough time to use, but it was an Indonesian little video clip of them fighting, the galleons fighting, you know, fighting the Dutch galleons, you know, and it was, I mean, I could see myself doing that and showing that to kids, and you know, and they're celebrating over their victory over the Dutch, you know. It's really there's amazing stuff on YouTube, you know, and so putting that into a, you know, a presentation and so forth. There's things that you can do for children, and including with little boys, you know, to make it interesting. So I'd be happy to do that. It's just a matter of getting my name out there. So if any of you, you know, have any suggestions or want to refer them to me, please feel free to do so. I will put my contact information where I can be reached, okay? Because I'm out there to educate. I'm a nun. I'm out there to serve and to serve the community. So that's what I'm about.
And can you tell us, how did you come to the dolls, and were you involved in other creative work? I'm going to guess you knew about sewing and that kind of thing.
Well, I'll be honest, up to this time, I'm in my 60s now, and up to this time, I was just working in the corporate world, either education or corporate world. I never paid much attention to the arts. I mean, I cherished the arts that other people did, but I didn't engage in the creative process at all. I was kind of raised, you know, when you're raised in an immigrant family like mine, and they had been interned during World War II, you know, during as Japanese Americans, gone through great distress. And then my mother had survived the Tokyo bombings, you know, I mean, she a war refugee from World War II. I think all they wanted for us was to become secure and successful. And so they focused on either, you know, a lot of us went into law because, you know, they wanted to be able to protect the community, you know, from the injustice, but also, I mean, it was the sciences, you know, or the business, you know, and so that's what we were taught to focus on. And I never really took an art class, you know, anything like that. And then in the society, I was very focused on, you know, they gave me the opportunity to go to MIT, and I studied political science, and with a strong focus on, you know, economics and so forth. And so I spent a lot of time in the corporate world in social policy research. And it frankly was only when I had a major accident a few years ago on the Beltway, on Easter Day, practically, was killed by a 18-wheeler. And that caused so much cognitive damage that I couldn't do the kind of research work that I did before, specifically around statistics. And while I was recovering, I took Wendy's class, and it was that I really had time to explore my more creative, side in some ways. And through that, with the help of my fellow doll makers, to be exposed to it to consider it as a real opportunity to take up my educational work and the cause of social justice in a different way that I'd never considered. Deanna, she's one of my sisters there. Hi, Deanna. You're muted. You're muted, Deanna.
You did know how to sew. You made me a blouse.
I know. I always knew how to sew, but it was something
That's what
that
they wanted to know.
Yeah, I did for other people, in terms of clothing and things like that. Yeah. And I did teach people that too. Oh, yes, Amy. There's Queen Elizabeth.
You have to unmute, Emmy.
Oh, okay.
A comment.
Yeah.
I just
That's one of my,
say,
you can't see it very well, but it's one of my guinea pigs, Serena, dressed in a Queen Elizabeth outfit with a ruff.
I have a comment.
Hey, Emmy, thank you.
Cute. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, someone go ahead and start talking and I'll see you light up.
I have a comment.
Is that Vivian?
Yes, it is. I just want to say that it was a beautiful presentation and the flowers behind you are really lovely.
Oh, that's a photo and it's from my backyard. So my complex. Thank you so much.
Great. Who else has a question or comment for Sister Linda?
Linda, this is me again. I'll go again. When I had, first of all, I had no idea that Asian Americans went through some of the same horrors and parallels as African Americans did. And I was really struck by that. I was really struck by the parallels of the lynching, the parallels of being kidnapped from China or where have you, and forcibly brought to this country. The parallels were they just really awestruck me. I had no idea. And I'm so glad that I remembered to zoom in because it just really filled me with so much more information that I had absolutely no idea of. And I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. I think that's why, even with among Asians here in the United States who may have come more recently and who I think it's therefore incumbent of us to become partners with Black Lives Matter and other groups, about civil rights, because we had a common history. And many of those who come right now more on the H-1 visa side don't realize that we went through similar things. We came in such brutal circumstances ourselves. We owe a lot to our ancestors and then to those in the civil rights movement, the Black leadership of the civil rights movement, for what we can do now. We couldn't even immigrate here before. Come on, So I think this is stuff that I always think history is so important, because there is so much more commonality across us all by understanding history, and when you think too about Irish and Italian Americans, for example, and what the bigotry that they went through, and we don't, and yet we end up finding ourselves on opposite, sides, and it just boggles my imagination. But it's true. My sister-in-law is from a family that came in the 1840s to California. So her way back. And her mother was one of the first Asians to go to UC Berkeley and get her degree there, you know, a woman. And I still remember going through some of the alleys of Chinatown in San Francisco and thinking how, you know, I mean, you know, when you think about women being stripped naked, you know, at children at the port, you know, and being sold, just like in South Carolina, you know, where they got off the ships and they were, you know, it's the same thing, you know. And Dennis Kearney, he's got a street named after him in San Francisco. He was one of the biggest union gang people who would go around and do the lynch mobs every twice, you know, several times a month, you know. And you know, Mayor Phelan was the mayor. You know, he was the one that helped enact the Anti-Chinese Exclusion Act. And he's a big hero, and he's got all these, you know, places named after him in San Francisco. You know, and that's a so-called liberal city. So, you know, I spent many years in San Francisco working there, and it's interesting. You know, anyway.
Yeah, very important issues to discuss. Patricia says, "Thank you, Linda, for your presentation. It was so informative and creative." Monica, how can we receive that wonderful list of references, the movies and books? And with those, we will post on our Facebook page. I'll compile a group email and just email to everyone also.
That would be great.
Do that. Yeah, so.
And I know that my many of my sisters and friends, for example, couldn't make it tonight because, and they're on other time zones as well. So having that link, the what do you call it? The whatever the YouTube or whatever recording would be great for them. So thank you.
So someone also asked if we could share the PowerPoint. I know it's a very big document. But
I think the PowerPoint might be, it's kind of huge in terms of the amount of memory it would, because all those photos, you know, so that's a little difficult. If you could just use the, I think the recording link would be a lot easier.
Just the recording link. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
You know, I also, frankly, those slides of the immigration data, that was from permission by my friend at Pew Research. And so I don't know if I'd want to get that, my presentation, you know, the slide presentation out there. I'm sorry, I don't think that I could do that.
Okay, just to be cautious.
Right.
Yeah.
Emmy?
Emmy, go ahead, Emmy.
You mind one more? I'm sorry, Linda. One more.
In the costume? Look.
It's from Game of Thrones. It's from one of the characters in Game of Thrones.
Lisa, can you
yeah,
spotlight that? Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's wearing a Game of Thrones costume.
Oh.
Okay. We have to include if you could please share photos like this with us, and I would love to put
on
in
the
our
Facebook
newsletter.
Sure.
Yeah, and in our newsletter, sharing our creative community. Thanks for bringing that out, Emmy. That's so fun.
I also make fantasy dolls, but I can only do that on order because I get into trademark and, you know, rights with the company. You know, like I did one of who's the one on Game of Thrones who was the blonde one, the white, what was her name again? Daenerys, yeah, and her dragon. I remember making a doll and whatever for you know, but I can't sell that online because of trademark, you know. Or I've done one of what's her name, the warrior princess of Xena. I did that for another person, but I couldn't, you know, I can't sell those on site. But you know, if people want a personal order, I'd be happy to do that.
Oh wow, that's great. And just a reminder, Rachel reminds us that Linda Kato will be a speaker at Our Home Too, a forum in support of Asian American Pacific Islander communities on May 27th, which is a Thursday. Do you know the time?
It's at 7 o'clock, just like this. Yeah.
And hosted by the Baltimore Sister Cities. You're all invited to attend this webinar and spread the word. For more information to register, she has AAPI 2021 at Eventbrite or on the Eventbrite site. Go to Eventbrite and search AAPI 2021, AAPI for Asian American Pacific Islander 2021 on
And that's
Eventbrite.
Lisa, I just want to let people know how they can save the chat with all these URLs by hitting those three little dots and then save it, and then quickly move it off because it's hard to find it on your computer afterwards. So move it to your desktop or to
right. Some of the items were not in the chat; they were in the presentation.
Right.
So the three little dots, if you put the cursor at the very bottom of your screen, it will say more with three little dots. And then you
I think it's save next.
Or
you
go
just
to chat and
You know,
then
it only works if you're on a regular computer.
Oh.
It does not work for a phone or the Mac or stuff like that.
okay. So we'll just still send them out. I'll send out the video and then everything will be in that. And where did we leave off? There were so many. Thank you, Linda. It was good seeing you and the other doll makers from Lauren. Okay, great.
Okay, well.
So any final questions or comments for Sister Linda?
Well, please feel free to visit my site, shop. I'm always, and please refer it to people. And I'm always also willing to make do presentations. So you can connect to me on that site. Okay.
Did you put your contact information in the chat? I may have missed it, but.
Sister Linda, what is the name of your order?
It's the Society of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Here in Montgomery County, we have Stone Ridge of the Sacred Heart, the Schools of the Sacred Heart there. So that's our school locally, one of ours is at Georgetown University, but we have also the Stewart Center, which is a Justice and Peace Center in across from Catholic University in Washington, D.C. Okay. So we're quite a presence here, but we're an international order based in Rome, but we have our provincial house for the North America in St. Louis. Okay,
thank you so much.
You know, I'm going to give you my personal email because it might be easier, to reach me. Let me see, I'm trying to put it in. G at gmail.com. Okay, so feel free to reach me there. And the store is Kato Historical. I'm sorry.
Did you send it to everyone, Linda? Did you send it to everyone because it hasn't come up yet? You may not have sent it yet.
I've sent it. I've just sent it.
Okay.
lkato99@gmail.com.
lykato99@gmail.com. Yeah.
And
then there's the shop. Okay. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Okay. And thank you, Wendy, again.
Thanks again.
I can't wait to attend your class in person again. And thank you, Fred. I hope we meet sometime. Okay. I do.
Sure.
At Sister Cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Linda.
Lisa has my contact information that we can communicate.
Well, please send me your email and then send me right to my email and I will be in touch. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, she's going to send it to us. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I also put it here too. So if there's anything that you need, just contact me. I'll be happy to do it. Okay.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Lisa.